The Deutsche Bank X-Tracker US tracks the MSCI USA 600 index. It reflects the value of the US dollar and the ongoing performance of the 600 largest US corporations by market value. It has a market cap of 292 million rand and a dividend yield of 0.7%. Where are we going with this one?
Well, just to clarify, the top US 600 stocks have a market cap in aggregate that is in the trillions. The 292 you refer to there is the aggregate value of issued units that Deutsche Bank has been able to sell to South Africans, reflecting that index. So that means that it's, fairly significant placement, but I noticed that that stayed fairly constant. I suspect maybe there's a bunch of institutions that have got purchases of these things and that the retail trade is relatively small. But as Viv mentioned earlier, at least Deutsche Bank go to the trouble of making a double on this so you can get in and get out. But it is often a double that has like a 1% gap between it. So the point is, if you bought them and thought, oh my goodness, I bought the wrong one, and then you want to sell it back, there's going to be a cost of about 1%.
What we're really doing here, though, gentlemen, is talking about the underlying geographies. Yes. So now we talk about the US and whether we are any more positive on the US and those 600 companies that this one basically represents.
But the thing is, the US is even more so than the UK, dependent on the global economy. The majority of money actually made by the S&P 500, for instance, comes from outside the US. So these companies this is basically a world index. You're talking about a kind of a view on the world economy. And I do think if you look at the world economy, you take out the problems in Europe, you take out some of the problems we're seeing in the UK, for instance, the world economy as a whole is not doing as badly as one might think. Just looking at some of the things we've seen so far. China is growing slower, but 8% to 7.5% is slower, but still reasonably strong. We're seeing India growing at 5 to 6%. Other parts of the world, Africa, for instance, is doing rather well. We're seeing some troubles in South America, but there are parts that are doing well as well. And the US basically, because of the nature of its companies, captures a larger aspect of the world than almost any other geography we're looking at.
Well, if we're talking about a world index here, then it's a no-brainer for our happiest trader out there who sees
I love
a very rosy picture.
I'm extremely positive, and I love companies like Apple, which is a major constituent here, Johnson & Johnson, another one of our favorites, Coca-Cola, AT&T, all of those big ones that stand out, because the 600 is even bigger than the S&P 500. So like that, like the yield that you get, very positive. The Americans are interesting. They pay vague attention to what's going on outside the borders, but in the main, their main economic read they take is that monthly job number, and everything else they couldn't care two hoots. So
you just got to watch the jobs number then is what you're saying.
But in fact, that's been turning upwards. So I think that's why you've seen a nice uptick in the US market. It's not yet trading at its all-time highs, but it's sure not very far from that, and I think we'll take those numbers out in due course. Then again, as I said before, here you will have the rand then strengthening to the dollar, going back below 8, and then the benefit of being in this thing will be somewhat neutralized.
Viv, let's have a look at the performance of the share price graph. Talk us through it.
Paul mentioned like in all-time highs, you're not seeing it in US dollar terms, but in rand terms, you're pretty close back to that level actually, because the rand is so much weaker than it was a few years ago. So we are seeing basically quite a big move in this index over the last couple of years. It's been a good place to be in, and I do think of the developed economies, this is still the best place to be. The US companies basically are doing a bit better than most other parts of the world. They do have the leaders in the tech industry, and for some unknown reason, the Europeans and the Japanese so far have not been able to catch up, or in fact, in the case of the Japanese, with regards to Sony, etc., have fallen behind the US with regards to that important sector of the world. If you want to invest in tech, I think the US is the only place to be, quite frankly.
I see. We could be breaking the negative trend that we've had to this point in the show, hot or not, on DBX US.
No.
I thought we were getting somewhere with this. Come on, Viv, break the trend.
I'd be hot in the US.